Okay, next up, we have Bruce Delgado and Aubrie Heckel from the Bureau of Land Management. Bruce is a botanist with BLM's California Central Coast Field Office. He graduated from Humboldt State in 1990 with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Wildlife Management. As a BLM botanist at Fort Ord National Monument, Bruce is involved with the ecology and habitat conservation and management programs and projects. Here's a fun fact about Bruce. He's the mayor of the city of Marina. And as the mayor, among his other mayoral duties, he leads Oak Woodland, Coastal Dune, Maritime Chaparral restoration projects for the Marina City Parks. And since 2001, he has been a volunteer at Monterey County and state parks leading wildland, weed abatement projects. Aubrie Heckel is a botanist at Fort Ord National Monument. She started for BLM in 2022 after earning a master's degree in environmental science from California State University, Monterey Bay. Aubrie started her resources management career working seasonal field positions at Yosemite National Park on invasive weeds and restoration projects, and at Monocacy National Battlefield in Maryland as a hydrology intern. Fun fact about Aubrie is that she was able to be hired permanently with BLM through completion of a Mosaics in Science Diversity internship program, wild man, geared at increasing relevancy, diversity, and inclusion within the U.S. Department of Interior. That's kind of like good news within the good news session. The title of their presentation is Adventures and Discoveries During 30 Years of Conservation Work at Fort Ord National Monument. That's 1993 to 2023. Let's welcome Bruce and Aubrie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Fort Ord National Monument, home of the long-tailed weasel, Cassilia ambigua in salutata, Clint Eastwood, and Monterey Ceanothus. The cool thing about Fort Ord is 60% of it has been set aside for conservation, open space, and perpetuity. It's the size of San Francisco, and about half of it is Fort Ord National Monument, plus the State Parks 1,000, plus the UC 1,100, plus some other smaller pieces. So in this day and age, for the environment to trump human values, it's a pretty good deal. Half the monument is BLM proximate, the other half is Army, and on the map to the right, the BLM is shown in two yellow parcels, 1,200 plus 7,000 acre parcels, and then the Army's 8,000 is in the large gray area to the left, which will be transferred to the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, after the unexploded ordnance is removed from there. Of course, the Army had a huge influence, lots of fire, lots of grazing, lots of road development, but very little urban development compared to the cities surrounding Fort Ord, which are basically concrete jungles. So we have the Army to thank for all the open space and beautiful habitats on Fort Ord. Recreationally, it's a world-class area, largest bicycle event in the nation, Sea Otter Classic. 1.2 million visitors come to Fort Ord National Monument each year. It's got about 85 miles of routes. But between the routes, there's no public access allowed unless it's volunteer, research, restoration, that kind of thing. So you can enjoy the recreation of a beautiful landscape knowing that everything that you're not riding on or walking on is protected. A lot of dog activities, a lot of equestrian, a lot of animal viewing, both domestic and wildlife. We've had 80 field trips in 30 years, thanks in large part to the Native Plant Society Monterey Bay chapter for advertising those and some other chapters as well. The plant communities, here's a great photo of Coryzanthe douglasii. It's so beautiful when it's doing its thing like this in the foreground, and in the background there's some maritime chaparral and coast live oak woodland. The habitat communities, the plant communities are arranged kind of like this, the maritime chaparral on the mesas and the south-facing steep, thin-soiled slopes with coast live oak woodland in the lower slopes and a lot of the north-facing slopes. And then the watersheds have wetlands. There's approximately 60 vernal pools and freshwater marshes on Fort Ord. Aubrie, do you want to take the habitat restoration?
All right, everybody, now for the good news. From 1996 to 2023, we have been able to restore 196 acres. This is about 7.6 acres annually. We do this largely with the help from volunteers to plant thousands of plants each year, so we hope to see all of you out there in the winter if you come by. So this is an aerial photo from 1966 showing roads driven by the Army. These roads were created with bulldozers and have turned into eroded gullies over time. So our focus has primarily been on restoring these gullied roads. You can see these large cuts on the landscape. On the map, the teal color represents a subset of our restoration sites in teal. We have restored 250 sites, and we have revisited 65 sites in the last 2 years. We hired students, both graduates and undergraduates, and we call them the Eco Crew, and they lead volunteers to survey these sites to look at vegetation coverage using the point-intercept transect method. And so we are assessing our restoration success at each of these sites. This is a table showing the total acreages restored for each of our habitat types. Maritime chaparral, annual grassland, and coast live oak woodland are the top 3 habitats that we restore. And much of our restoration efforts are focused in the maritime chaparral because this is where most of our listed and rare plant species are. So we want to increase suitable habitat through repairing mass erosion, and this is just an absolute beautiful photo of the maritime chaparral. We were talking earlier, like, how many species of manzanita are in this? I don't know. So several species of manzanitas are in the background, and in the foreground is the yellow version of Kesselea foliolosa, just for fun, because it's a plant conference. Some additional notable species in the maritime chaparral include dudleas, which we started to map to monitor threats, including poaching and mountain biker impacts. We have one of the most southernmost locations of Ceanothus canis, and we named the whole canyon after it on Fort Ord National Monument. And then Lepicinia calycina. This is just a really sweet photo of it with its bombus pollinator friend. So here's an example of a restoration site over time in the maritime chaparral. The upper left photo shows a former road that turned into a large gully. We used a bulldozer to recontour the landscape. We usually do this in the fall. And then we use sterile barley seed and straw to hold everything in place during the winter months when we get heavy rains. And we also plant during that time, so we do native plug plantings. 20 years later, we see the natural plant community come back. So from the top left corner to the bottom right, we see our manzanitas coming in. It's about 20 years later. All right, so tools that cause the problem can also be the solution. That's the main takeaway. So bulldozers created these roads, and also bulldozers fix them. And so for us on Fort Ord National Monument, it's relatively easy to do maritime chaparral restoration. So moving on to grassland restoration. This habitat type for us is the hardest to restore. So in the background, we see a nice patch of bunch grass on the monument, and this is what we're aiming for with some of those annuals, the native annuals. But overall, we can restore the landscape, so you see the gully and then no gully, but we still have a problem with annual grasses moving in and outcompeting some of our native plantings.
The grassland grazing and research. Since 1996, we've been using up to 3,000 goats and or sheep in a wildland-urban interface, and we have 4 ongoing research studies, 2 of which we'll discuss today. But it's kind of interesting. The goats' favorite food seems to be the California state lichen, Ramalina menziesii, lace lichen, and the second favorite food seems to be coast live oak leaves. As far as we know, no one in California, including us, has been able to shift the expansive non-native grasslands to a primarily native grass and native forest plant community. We started with sheep in '96, and they were not effective in reducing fuels or moving the needle where we wanted. So in 2014, we brought in goats to see if they were effective, firstly, at converting coyote brush scrub back to the coastal grasslands that it was in the 1990s when the Army left. In the center of this photo is one of those places. It's just a 5-acre dense coyote brush scrub that was in the 1990s coastal coastal grassland. So we bring up to 5 semi-trucks with goats. It's always fun to watch them unload. And this is what it looks like when they're grazing. This is what it looks like when they're done grazing, except that in the middle of the photo, we have a no-graze fence plot showing a dense coyote brush scrub that was there before as a control, and we have 24 plots, each of which get 3 transects using the point-intercept method. In this graph on the right, there's a dotted line down the center, to the left of which shows the major items that are decreasing, the categories, all the woody browse that the goats like to eat more, such as the oaks, the coyote brush scrub, the coyote brush, and other native shrubs. And on the right side, those things that are increasing, like what's replacing the coyote brush if you take it out. And primarily it's annual grass in this case, and the non-native suite of erodium non-native forbs. The second study we're doing that I'm going to mention is whether we can, whoops, I think I went too fast there. So step 1, replacing the coyote brush scrub with the coastal grasslands, that is not very difficult. But step 2, moving it further so that it's a native grass and forb abundance and diverse is the harder trick. So to get there, trying to convert this primarily non-native grassland, we have 3,400 acres, to a primarily native coastal grassland with lower fuel loads, so there's a lower fire risk in this WUI area. We have this 15-acre study area, and we've seen an increase in those areas that have less than 25% exotic cover. We're talking primarily this really nasty, thick ripgut brome wild oats. So they're in the red area. So in 2020, we had a lot of red, not very much blue, not very much open habitat. And then 2022, after 3 years of higher frequency goat grazing, like 2 or 3 times per year, at the right time of year, hopefully is what we shoot for, we've seen this higher suitability for native bunchgrass and forb habitat, moving the needle in the direction that we want. Our take home is that we have a real challenge trying to match livestock availability with timely grazing needed. That is when the ripgut brome and wild oats are in the milky or soft starch phase more than once per year as each cohort comes into that stage when their seed heads are in that phenology. But it's been an awesome experience these many years working with the South American herders and their dogs, sheep, and the goats to better manage and understand these grasslands when you're out there year-round, because it's a year-round deal, with many university faculty and students, 2 master's theses, and lots of volunteers of all ages.
All right, moving on to the rare plants of Fort Ord. So we have surveyed for seaside birdspeak, Cordylanthus rigidus littoralis, Sandgilia, Gilia tenuiflora arenaria, Contra Costa goldfields, Lastenia conjugans that you see in that vernal pool there, and also Monterey spineflower, Corzanthe pungens. And so what we did is we surveyed for locations across the monument for all 4 of these plant species in 2021 and 2022, and we mapped the boundaries for each of these populations. We then compared these occupied acreages to surveys done in the 1990s. So in this map, you can see all the little dots at which we surveyed. Most of these plants are in the Maritime Chaparral. So starting with the graphs on the right, the x-axis is a site, so one of those dots on the map corresponds to a bar on the chart. And on the y-axis is the percent change in occupied acreages comparing the surveys in the 1990s to the 2020s. Bar graph going up means an increase in occupied acreage. Bar going down is a decline. So starting with seaside birdspeak at the top, most sites had a decline in acreage. This is the same with Sandgilia, the next chart down. And then moving towards the third graph, generally sites had an increase in Monterey spineflower acreage, but we believe all areas that are decreasing in acreage could be to brush encroachment. So moving on to Contra Costa goldfields, 2 of the 3 existing Contra Costa goldfield patches maintain large, dense areas in vernal pools. However, one patch appears to be extirpated since 2016, and we do not know why. But the good news is now we know what to do, since this is a good news section. So we could regularly reverse brush encroachment using fire-based treatments or manual techniques. And then also we are planning to implement a seed collection and dispersal program to reintroduce Contra Costa goldfields into the extirpated Machine Gun Flats location. So Machine Gun Flats is an Army name for a really beautiful wetland. So there have been 3 new endemic Fort Ord plant species that have been described since 2011. Woohoo, good news. Vernal pool bentgrass, Agrostis lacuna vernalis. Eryngium montereyens, Monterey button celery, found in vernal pools and wetlands. And Coryzanthe minutaflora, Fort Ord spineflower. It likes open sandy habitats. All right.
Oh, this one got in there again somehow. I want you all to say this plant. Okay, you gotta repeat after me. Let me say it first once. Castellaria ambigua insolutata. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Castellaria ambigua insolutata. This plant has big self-esteem and it's got a big name, but it's a little plant with a lot of color. So it's my favorite on Fort Ord, so that's why I wanted to hear you say it. Vernal pools are really important, not just for these, well, that was a CMPS 1B and not other listed species, but animals too, as you all know. A larval California tiger salamander, any salamander, you can tell it's a larvae when it's got gills, external gills, which it loses when it gains the function of internal lungs, just like us. The adult form of this appears like this, but there is trouble in paradise. The upper right is a introgress genetic form of a hybrid between the barred salamander, Ambustoma marvordium, and the California tiger salamander, which is one of the main reasons it was finally listed as threatened. In the upper left, it's also kind of a hybrid, mostly native, but some hybrid in there. So when it's non-native or it's a hybrid, it gets larger dots, more dots on the dorsal surface, and they can join to make bars from the barred salamander from Texas, brought in as bait. The larvae is used as bait for fish. So in Salinas area, that's where they started. And since then, they've moved all the way up into the Sacramento Valley. A lot of time spent by Brad Schaefer's lab at UCLA since 2002 on tiger salamanders on Fort Ord. Recently, a 2019 doctorate by Robert Cooper was completed, checking to see if there was a selective advantage for the native salamander using different inundation hydro periods of 120, 140, and 90 days. But there was no significant difference, no advantage to the natives, so that is going to be back to square one, trying to figure out how to help the native. The pigs on Fort Ord were quite an issue. They're very cute when they're in that striped watermelon phase, but these beautiful wet meadows that are dominated by Contra Costa goldfields are dug up by the cartilaginous noses of the pigs. They're like rototilling these, and so we removed all 110 that had come in 2004, and then 2006 they were really doing their thing. And the take home here is you don't ever scare or hurt a pig if you're trying to remove pigs before they're secure in the traps. And secondly, use volunteers as much as possible because it's a hugely labor-intensive project, and for good PR, you've got to have people supporting the project.
So I'll go fast. We just wanted to recognize the Seeds of Success collection crews in this slide, and thank you for all the hard work for long-term storage of plant materials. All of our volunteers, young and old, high schoolers working with goats, using big tools, and the eco crew who are our students and graduate students who write a lot of our technical reports. They collect the data, they crunch the numbers. So thanks to them, we can't do the work we do without them. And then if you have any questions, you can contact me or Bruce at Fort Ord National Monument. Thank you.
Hi. So any plans on, I guess, using prescribed burns or traditional burning for the forb and grassland, I guess, restoration aspects?
Yeah, because we're in a WUI, it's real sensitive. So the stepwise progression we would take is we'd start with wet lining very small areas and doing small burns so that people could get comfortable with them. But we haven't got to that point yet. But we would love to do that. And I know that the TNC has done that a lot down in the Santa Rosa Plateau over decades. But they haven't had great long-term success with it either. And they put a lot of money and time into it. Yes, Ellen.
Is this working? Thanks for your decades of work on Fort Ord, Bruce. That's wonderful, and really excited to see Aubrie coming on. Do you happen to remember a song that you wrote about frogs?
Oh, yeah. So it was early in my BLM thing, and back in 1992, and I went, what's so good about life? What do I love my job for? What's my purpose in life? So I came up with this song. It goes, it's the green in the mountains, the white on the buckbrush, flowers in the grassland, it's all that I love. It's the rocks in the river and the water rushing by. It's the wind in the air. It's all that I love. It's the kangaroo rat and the California quail, black-tailed deer, and the big-eared bat. It's the tiger salamander and the yellow-legged frog, the red-legged frog, and all the legged frogs. For it's them that I love, and it's them that I owe, for it's their getting by that's my getting by. Yes, it's them that I love, and it's them that we owe, for it's their getting by that's our getting by.